there's no handbook. You're just kind of moving off of vibes, off of feelings.
Just reading the room.
Reading the room. You know, the room is huge in the business world. There's a big room with a lot of people in it. You know, so it's like, how do you navigate through all that and still keep a level head?
There's a distinction that Daniel Hall often makes between creatives and artists. Artists are free to create as they please, without any underlying accountability to others. Creatives, such as himself, are out to provide solutions to artists or brands. That clear distinction is something that has required a specific understanding between what it means to continually produce and the symbiotic relationship with money and business. As he said, there's no handbook.
My name is Daniel Hall.
That is a lie.
Decatur Dan.
Yes.
Okay. Decatur Dan is my moniker, but yes, I'm Daniel Hall. I am my mother's child. No, I'm a photographer, I'm a director, I'm a creative, I'm a producer, entrepreneur, all those things. But I don't really like walking around saying that type of stuff, but on paper, yeah, that's what I am.
Decatur Dan, Daniel Hall, depending on what phase of his life you've met him, has clearly defined chapters to his career. An early start slanging streetwear for Standard in Atlanta would be his first opportunity to create content on the regular. The shop was one of 2 key spots in the area to cop the latest sneakers and gear. Regular customers and the vibrant music scene in Atlanta would mean that it wouldn't be long before Dan would turn the camera from sneakers and clothes to up-and-coming and established rappers in one of hip-hop's biggest, if not most important markets. Working with the likes of T.I., 2 Chainz, Big Crit, Jeezy, and more was soon his new calling. Shooting music videos wouldn't be Dan's final career calling. One thing that Dan doesn't lack is agility and vision to reinvent himself and create the necessary upside to align himself with the right flow and the right people.
I don't know if you can curse on this radio show.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
You can do whatever you want, Dan.
Okay, great. Honestly, a lot of street smarts is just like, yo, I don't fuck with this person. I'm not gonna fuck with this person. I'm gonna move over here. So I think it's more so just like gravitating towards the things and the people that you do like, and that's, you know, and staying away from the bad things.
How much of that is innate and how much of that did you just learn being around hip hop and stuff? Whether you're coming up through the streets or building a career in creative culture, there's no roadmap. Dan's path is a testament to that. From shooting gear for an online store to music videos for 2 Chainz and now Nike and Beats, they're all opportunities that had to be seized. The freeform nature can be simultaneously beneficial and challenging. It benefits those with a clear understanding of where they want to go, but a challenge for those that perhaps lack the confidence to define their own path and their own place. How you get there can look 1,000 different ways, but what's certain is that there's the opportunity to leverage hard work, opportunities, and tolerance for uncertainty, unlike many other industries. You are your own gatekeeper. The best way to look at it is you and I connected under a very different pretense a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think we actually met for quite a while after that, right? Like when we first...
Probably the first time we met through Alex. On AIM, yeah.
No, we never met through Alex.
Oh, no.
We knew each other before Alex.
Yeah, we definitely did. There was a lot of AIM back and forth.
Yeah.
You know, lots of, hey, can you post this for me?
I honestly was always super annoyed when Dan would hit me up because I knew he only wanted one thing, and that was to post up.
That was nice, but I gave you good content.
Yeah.
So you had to post it.
I didn't have to post it.
But you wanted to.
That was like the original relationship that we developed.
Mm-hmm.
But I think now looking back, what I find so interesting is that your hustle, honestly, is probably what has defined your whole career, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, let's start at the very beginning of where I guess we connected, or even before we connected. Like, what was it like growing up in Georgia, in Decatur? And like, did you feel as though you had this sort of like creative drive or spirit? Or did you grow into that?
I grew up around the production industry, you know, which is, you know, the production is not necessarily creative. They kind of go hand in hand, but they're also very separate too. So like I grew up around the production. My dad was a camera operator, a video editor, and I never really wanted to follow in his footsteps, not because I wanted to rebel. I had a great relationship with my father, but I kind of wanted to find my own way. And so, and my dad, and I wasn't really into what the I guess the clientele that my dad was servicing, which was like mega churches and things like that. Well, I thought, fooling around with cameras was cool and playing around in Final Cut Pro 4, was fun. I was like, I wasn't into the content that was being created itself, just because it wasn't of interest to me, So, and it wasn't until later, until I was still in college when I started working with a pretty prominent DJ at the time, and he needed like some video content. And I was like, oh, well then, I know how to do all this stuff. Like I at that point in time was when I realized like, oh man, like I really wish I would have paid attention to like what my dad was kind of like showing me the ropes a little bit more. Yeah. I was always paying attention. I was just kind of learning through osmosis.
So what were you doing with your skills at that time before the DJ approached you?
I was using them for the blog. When I worked at Standard.
Standard being a sneaker store?
Standard, the sneaker store in Atlanta. I mean, at the time, I'm sure there's lots that have popped up now, but at the time it was just those two.
Being Wish
and Standard. And like basically, and the blogs were starting to pop off now, but like blogs were really like for people like High Sobriety and Hypebeast and things like that. No store had a blog at the time, really. Well, I launched the Standard blog, like basically like found a template, hacked it up, whatever, and then just started putting content on there. Yeah. And I basically
Did you know what you were doing at the time?
No, it was just playground. Yeah. But I knew what I liked. I knew what I liked to read. And I knew what I liked to see. Yeah. And so it was like kind of like twofold. It was like, one, I'm going to basically, looking back on it, it's like, one, I'm going to have this be a place. We didn't have a shop, you know what I mean? And the owner at the time didn't really want to spend, lots of money like on e-commerce sites back in the day were very expensive. There was no Shopify like there is now that you just pay like a monthly fee and blah, blah, blah. It's like, if you want an e-commerce site, it was going to cost you upwards of $5,000 to $10,000 to like code it from the ground up, the whole thing. You had to have your own server. There was no, all this stuff.
AWS and stuff. Yeah.
So needless to say, a blog was super like low barriers to entry. Like, like you got free WordPress, gets the template, customize it a little bit and cool. Yeah. And so I was like, you know what? This is a way for me to like update clients with what's new. But then I also wanted to make it a little bit like a community. So like I would post up stories and things like that. It just, things like that. And it worked and people were engaged. When the time I left the store, they went from having no internet presence or just like social media internet presence. Like people, using MySpace, using Facebook wasn't even big then, Twitter to promote like themselves to getting 1,500 unique views per day. Yeah. We're talking about for a small mom and pop kind of store in Atlanta that has like a national, if not global readership. Yeah. And but honestly for me, that was fun in doing it. Yeah. And
did you think there was a timeline on that? Like you kind of, we're going to get to the end of that. So
it's just evolved too. Cause now it's not, it's evolved from blogging to Twitter, to Facebook, to now to Instagram, to whatever it is. Yeah. And so the platform was always changing. Yeah. People don't look for the same thing in a website that they do now that they did 10 years ago.
So how did you parlay all of that experience into the next step or the next chapter?
It wasn't really intentional. I ended up leaving that store just because it was time. I kind of outgrown it. I kind of hit a glass ceiling or whatever. And unfortunately I had to leave and I didn't really know what was next, but I knew I'd been practicing making content for the last 2-3 years. And I was like, what I was doing with that store, people would come in. There were celebrities be like, hey, can you do what you're doing for this store? Yeah. For me, whether that was like people like Greg Street or people like Don Cannon or, people who saw the value in what I was doing. I was like, hey, can you apply this to what I'm doing? And so then that transitioned from, streetwear, menswear, clothing, sneakers to, hip hop. Like people would come to me with songs. They're like, all right, I have this track. This was back when like leaking tracks was a big deal. Like no one actually leaked the track. It was more so like intentionally leaked. Yeah. But they basically what I was doing was sending out a press release, for lack of a better thing, and getting it on blogs. I had all these relationships with all these blogs because the hip hop bloggers who ran these hip hop blogs, they read the Hype Beasts and they read the High Sobrieties and they read all this stuff and they knew my name and they knew just from being passed around on internet circles or being sourced as like, Decatur Dan, this is, photos by this person or whatever. Yeah.
So from there, you ended up going into basically being hip hop PR kind of dude.
Yeah. But I wouldn't say PR just because I was just doing that because that was I did that out of necessity.
Yeah.
At its core, what I like doing was, okay, the strategy the strategy and then creating the actual content. How should we release this? Yeah. Oh, we should release this pulling references from, I don't know, some whatever the newest innovative way to put something out was, you know what I mean? Yeah. But content was still what I love to do the most, whether that was, I would do, I would just I was a studio rat. Like I would hang out in the studio all day with these people when I wasn't in school, when I wasn't working, with my camera and just record footage. I would go home after a couple weeks of collecting footage, and I would cut together like a little teaser or a little something, and then we would release that, and that would be promotional content to hype up whatever mixtape or whatever song or whatever project was about to be released. So
when you look back on that time there, what would you say was, the application of what you learned prior? Was there, the way I look at it is like you went from interacting with still life and like product to like real world implications with like rappers and whatnot.
Yeah,
so how was that different?
Very different. Taking pictures of still life it's very controlled for the most part. Like it's just like you do everything at your own pace, at your own time. You're really there just kind of like capturing what is the still life. This other stuff, it's like, well, you got to document it, and like the camera, and it's video, so cameras are rolling at all times. Documentary work is so hard because as soon as you stop recording is usually when the magic happens, so that was tough. And then on top of that too, it's like there's a lot of pressure because once you did one thing well, now it's like they want you to do that every time, and it's just not that easy. It's not something that you can just spit out all the time. Some of the stuff was very organic and just felt right, and it's just like, yeah, this is it. And then times where it was like not organic or not forced, but sometimes we would just collect people's money and we would go through the motions and we would do things and we would release it.
At that point in time, what was the expectation within hip hop? Like, what was the standard of quality required? The
expectation were kind of twofold.
Like what's the time frame we're talking about right now?
This is like, I don't know, years, but like world star at its height. Let's say Not Right at its height, or Two Dope Boys at its height.
Yeah. Like what were the artists at the time that you would say defined that genre?
This is like internet blog. This is like backpack internet kind of era. People like Asher Roth come to mind. People like the Cool Kids come to mind. Like whatever XXL freshman cover from that kind of Wiz Khalifa, Currency. But the expectation was to flood the market. Like there was like an abundance of content. This is when content really started to become kind of disposable. Yeah. It's like, let's create a video, or like, let's create this thing and let's just put it out. Like they didn't care if it was any good. As long as it was on a blog, as long as it was on a DSLR camera and it was HD and it was in focus, it was fine. It didn't have to be, they didn't care if it was good. It was just like, okay, we got it out there.
How did you feel about that?
I hated it.
Yeah.
I hated it because I wanted I'm still a perfectionist. Creatively, I know that it's okay for things not to be perfect, but I also know when this is just dumb.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, you can trick people. And I'm sure like they're I guess when I really started to realize it was when I started working with Jeezy. This was like the height again of World Star. Rick Ross, which was at the time like his, I guess, arch nemesis, if you will, had like 3 videographers, and they were just cranking out video content every day. And Jeezy wanted me to kind of compete with that. And I'm like, look, they've got this thing set up properly. They've got multiple videographers. They've got editors that they have on standby, and they're just putting out content hand over fist. They had a good system down, and it looked good, and it was whatever, but at its core, it was still nothing. And so I just didn't like wasting energy, and I didn't like wasting time. And then I also realized that when you're dealing with this caliber of artists, they have fans, and their fans do not care about the quality if it's good, because they're gonna like it. Jeezy would put out a trash record, like just like a bad single. I would just go on Twitter and I would just pay attention to like what people were saying, and it would just be, but they would all love it, and they'd be like, this is the greatest ever. And it's just like, that's when I realized like the fans are gonna ride for you no matter what. The fans are going to be there. They're going to support, which is good, which is great. But I knew from my end, from a creative end, I wanted to just be making great stuff.
Yeah.
Like that was undeniably good.
It came to a point when Dan eventually felt it was time to move on. Mind you, this was a few years ago. Hip-hop was undoubtedly a massive genre, but yet to fully recognize its new place atop the charts and popular culture. Dan's desire to be more driven by narrative, stories, and substance would be the push he needed to move away from creating content for the sake of content. So at what point did you feel as though it was time to move on? Like, was that sort of the definitive moment? Or was it just like a slow
I mean,
grind?
basically what ended up happening was I started to kind of find my groove a little bit. And like, so some of this like kind of like documentary type work essentially is what it was. Like kind of this documentary, like fly on the wall, like pull a rabbit out your ass, you know, like record some footage and turn it into something type of thing. It just started to turn into more conceptual stuff. Like, so it's like, because the quality was so good, like not just from it being like you could tell a difference between maybe my work and maybe someone else's just because mine had a little bit more of a feeling to it or connected with, maybe it didn't look better, but maybe it just connected with the viewer a little better. And essentially that led to like more conceptual work. So it was like, all right, cool. Like, well, because when you're working with these type of artists, you know, the rappers, it's like, they don't care whether or not you're a video director. All they know is you got a camera, you know how to operate it. We can shoot a music video. Okay. And so that kind of kicked off.
Do you think that will ever change? Do you think hip hop will start to embrace a bit more?
Embrace what?
Embrace more quality driven.
I mean, yeah, they are. But here's the thing. The street artists don't care. The street artists are mostly concerned about whether or not, I mean, if it's affordable, if it's like like, all right, cool. Is this like, why would I go pay so-and-so $50,000 for a video, Decatur Dan or, whoever, $50,000 for a video, when I can go get dude over here to do it for 5,000 or maybe even less. And they got the same camera, whatever. And like, so on, like, they don't really differentiate like that. But like, when you look at artists like Kendrick Lamar, or even like, I remember, it was a big thing when like Macklemore, when he was first came on the scene, like his videos were always over the top. Once Macklemore blew up, they became big budgets. But when he first started, they weren't necessarily big budgets. He was just working with the right people. He was working with USC film students. He was, what I'm saying? So he was a little bit more resourceful and he cared a little bit more about the craft.
Seeing how this all played out, do you feel as though like it's fair to say you loved hip hop?
Yeah,
right?
For sure. Still do.
Do you think that it left a bad taste in your mouth when you realized that the qualitative nature of hip hop was maybe not even really ever considered, right? Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely, as I think back on like my time and doing that, there's good memories and there's bad ones.
What would be a good memory and what would be a bad memory?
I mean, bad ones are just more like, them not caring about the craft. Like I, as a director, as a music video director, let's say that, not a film director, or like, because it's very different when you're talking about someone who's directing their own short film or their own documentary, because then the power is in their hands. But as a music video director, they're sharing the power with me. I could come up with the best treatment. I could do all the prep in the world, and I can be great. But guess what? If the artist shows up 6 hours late and they're faded and they're high or they're unenthused, or maybe they've had a bad day because they've been going, because their world is super complex and crazy. I don't get the performance out of them that I need, or I don't get the time that I need in order to create what I need to create. Well, then that's what I mean by sharing the power. Like, it's not in my hands. So it takes two people who
come to the table.
Yeah, to come to the table and do it. And so those are the bad experiences I've had, because I've had a lot of opportunities that, kind of just fell flat. And it wasn't necessarily, I'm not pointing the finger at anyone, but for whatever reason, it just kind of didn't work out. Yeah. And, but at the same time too, I chopped that up to, I'm a big person of like, it's all about timing. I don't let that kind of discourage. I never let that really discourage me. Mm-hmm. I just kind of was like, I kind of took it with a grain of salt, and I was like, all right, like, well, how can I change that? Yeah. How can I change that? But so the good memories, working with some of the most relevant artists of our time. I mean, especially with hip hop being the most popular genre. I mean, some of the artists on my roster, or not my roster, but on my reel, are still some of the most.
If I was to give you the ability to just like drop some names.
I've worked with pretty much every rapper in Atlanta. Let's say 5 years ago, every rapper in Atlanta in some capacity, whether that was Jeezy and T.I., the older generation, well, for me, the older generation, or newer people like Future and 2 Chainz. So that whole spectrum, whether like I was directing a video for them or whether they were a featured artist, you know, but I've worked with T-Pain, I've worked with Lil Wayne, I've worked with all these different people in some capacity. So, but then obviously those people now, like they're either more or less relevant, and there's tons of newcomers now. There's a new relevant rapper coming out of Atlanta every 6 months. Yeah. There's a new song, there's no hit song, and maybe that person stays around for 5-10 years. Maybe that was it. Yeah. So there's an abundance of talent. So that's what I'm saying. Anyone can go there and have a camera and kind of just hang around and kind of like float around on the studio scene, go to different events and things like that, and you'll catch work. You know, like you don't have to be the best in order to get a video with Gucci Mane. Yeah, and I've never got a video with Gucci, but shouts out to Gucci. Yeah, big Gucci fan.
But so it's interesting because you've sort of laid out this path, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there seems to be a very chapter approach to your career in a way. Mm-hmm. Would you disagree? Like, because I mean, you did the streetwear thing, then you did sort of the behind the scenes work, and then music videos, and then after that, you just ended up opening like a studio.
For sure.
Right? And like that work in itself was almost like a departure from sort of how do I put it? It's like sort of not unfocused, but the disorganized, chaotic world of hip hop towards maybe something a little bit more streamlined and structured.
Yeah. And I'm very, I will say this, you can always connect the dots looking backwards, right? Yes. So for me, none of this was very intentional. You know, like I just kind of like took an opportunity. If there was a good opportunity that was put in front of me, I felt that was for me. I would take that and I would run with it.
Like for you, what defines a good opportunity? Like when you only know like, hey, you know, there's probably limited information, but like what's going on in your mind to define a good opportunity? I'm sure you have like a mental checklist.
I have a mental checklist, but it's really just a gut feeling. And it's more so like, all right, is this something that I'm interested in? You know, is this something that, you know, I can support myself? Is this something
high taste level?
Yes. Yes. Is this something that that I can use as leverage to get me to another level? Yeah. And so I think if it checks like 2 out of 3 of those boxes, that I'm into it. And I'm very fortunate. You know, I mean, I work very hard, but at the same time, I'm very fortunate in the sense that I never woke up one morning and said, I want to be a music video director. I never woke up one morning and said, I want to shoot footwear for Nike or do stuff with Beats. But at the same time, I love what I'm doing. Yeah.
How would you say what you're doing now is different than anything in the past? And maybe actually before we even get into that, like what do you do now? How would you describe what you create?
We provide creative and production services at the end of the day. It's pretty simple, straightforward. But we definitely provide more than that. There's a lot of intangible things that we provide. It's like, come to us, we'll make your, like, and we work with clients. We come onto projects in different parts of the spectrum all the time. And what I mean by that is just like, sometimes we get asked to like come up with some creative, and, you know, we'll do from concept to camera, shoot the entire thing. Other times the creative's already prepared and we're just, you know, shooting it. Other times the creative's prepared. Maybe there's another photographer. Maybe they just want us to kind of support like with some video content or provide our space or whatever. And I mean, that's obviously not a big part of what we do, but if it's the right project, then we'll do that. But yeah, the difference now is just like, the reason why I wasn't really happy with what I was doing before was like, I mean, as many good things as there were about it, like it kind of boiled down to just the unprofessionalism that I wasn't used to. Like I consider myself a buttoned up kind of person in terms of just responsible. I check all my boxes. I do all my homework. I work really hard. And if I feel like that's not being reciprocated on the other end, because it's a partnership, you know, anytime you're doing a project with someone, I do a lot of client work. 90% of the stuff I do is client work. You know, there's only a few things that are like personal project here and there. So for me, every project is like a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. You know,
so do you think
not boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, but you know, it's a relationship.
Do you think that people who question the creative capabilities of client work are actually not entering the right partnerships? Like they're not staking their claim?
I just happen to be that type of person who's pushing, right? Who's pushing and who's also, like I said, like I like client work mainly because I'm not the type of person. I'm not like, I think there's a big difference between an artist and a creative. You know what I mean? And those two things aren't necessarily the same.
How would you define them in your own words?
Well, I think a creative is someone who can work for a client and produce work, and they know where to draw the line and say, okay, like, even though, because I mean, that happens every day, all the time. We have stuff that we want to do, like concepts that we're pushing, lighting, it can be the smallest thing, the retouching. And then the client will say, oh, no, we want this brighter, or we want this darker, can you do this? You know, and at the end of the day, as a creative, that's what you have to do. You have to listen to the client. They're the one paying your bill. As an artist also, a lot of times, they have a message. They have something that an agenda, something that they're trying to get across, bring into the world, a story that they're trying to tell. Yeah. And so, but they're a lot more stubborn, if you will. And that's why client work probably kills them. Yeah. You know, like they hate it. On the flip side of that, what is the saying? The best business is the best art. Is that Andy Warhol saying?
Sounds vaguely familiar, but I'm not going to back you up on that one because I don't know it. But
it's true. It's valid. You can fact check it if you want.
That definitely sort of connects into my next question, because do you consider yourself an astute business person? And if you do or you don't, people will eventually look at the photos and be like, hey, this is like a pretty nice ass studio that you're working out of. Like, this took time and obviously the ability to rise to the occasion with different jobs and like client work. So like, I think that the most interesting thing is, like, over the course of your career, how far has the financial consideration been from everything you've done?
For me,
because like, I know the stories like you were telling me back in the day where you're like hustling to sell like, you know, leftover t-shirts or whatever.
Sure. Right? I think it goes, for me, it boils down to, I know I'm not the smartest business person out here. Finances and economics and all that type of stuff. Like, that stuff to me, it's not that it doesn't matter. That's not my business though. What I do think I'm good at is like street smarts as it pertains to business.
Give me an example. What is street smarts in your eyes for someone that like doesn't have it?
Like yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Use me as an example. I heard that, Alex.
It's kind of...
Is it because I've never smoked and sold crack? Is that why?
No, that's not street smarts. Street smarts is...
Comments alone mean you're not...
I think it kind of boils down to, for me, knowing how to navigate in the field that you're in. Yeah. There's no handbook. You're just kind of moving off of vibes, off of feelings.
Just reading the room.
Reading the room. You know, the room is huge in the business world. There's a big room with a lot of people in it. You know, so it's like, how do you navigate through all that and still keep a level head and do that? So I think that's kind of what street smarts is. A lot of it's intuition. I don't know if you can curse on this radio show.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
You can do whatever you want, Dan.
Okay, great. Or just, and it's like, honestly, a lot of street smarts is just like, yo, I don't fuck with this person. I'm not going to fuck with this person. I'm going to move over here. So I think it's more so just like gravitating towards the things and the people that you do like. And that's, you know, and staying away from the bad things.
How much of that is innate and how much of that did you just learn being around hip hop and stuff?
I think some of it is quite frankly genetic. Could be. I mean, my favorite genre is hip hop, and not even just hip hop, gangster rap. Not because I've worked with a lot of these people, so I know their stories. Like I work with Future when he was right after he had changed his name from Meathead to Future. No one knows him as that, but you know, so I've seen his progression, you know what I mean? And so the stuff that he's talked about, I've seen him experience that. And not all of it's street stuff. Some of it's like romance, some of it's whatever. It's a way of kind of like carrying yourself and a way of handling yourself and like really just kind of being solid, like, you know what I mean? And not like being weak. And that's stuff that I didn't just learn that from my influence with hip hop. I learned that from my influence with sports. I learned that from growing up in the area where I grew up, you know.
Yeah. What do you mean by that exactly?
Growing up in a tougher community than most. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't necessarily that dangerous, you know, but it also wasn't just like everything wasn't all peachy clean, you know, whatever. You had to watch out for yourself. You had to take care of yourself, you know what I mean? Or you had to take care of your friends, and your friends had to look after you. So in general, we are a product of our environment. Yeah. And my environment made me who I am today.
Yeah. I guess to that point, like you being defined by that, do you feel as though most creatives that you see and you interact with lack that sort of understanding and that street smarts? Because I would say in general, like that's probably one of the most definitive things is that like,
do you think that's what a competitive edge?
Well, for you, yeah, for sure. Like I would argue that for the most part, like a lot of creatives out there don't don't stumble into the creative industry on the basis of the business side. They do it because they love making videos, photography, whatever it may be. So like, I guess I'm always fascinated to see how should they approach business? Like how have you approached business in a way that allows you to, in your eyes, like basically bring your creative ideas to light and not fight it? For a lot of creative people, they just simply feel as though there's something that's going to happen the minute they introduce money, too much money, whatever.
Listen, money is an uncomfortable situation for a lot of people. It's not just creatives or anyone. As soon as you start having to talk about money, it is something that is not going anywhere. You're always going to have to negotiate. You're always selling yourself. I don't care if you might not be a salesperson, but you're always selling yourself. Your salary, your rate, your this, your that. These are things that are always going to come up. It's worth getting comfortable, being able to talk about those conversations. Even for me, I don't love to have the conversations either. You know, I've definitely gotten better at it. I definitely know when to put my foot down. I know when to be flexible. I'm the same person who will charge you extra for every little thing that we do. I'm the same person who will do a free photo shoot for you, you know? So knowing when to bend and when not to bend, kind of one of the things that it takes experience too.
Yeah. Does someone need to just go through that and get burned a few times? How have you approached failure in your eyes? Failure
sucks. At the same time, to me, there's also no such thing as failure. Failure is like being burned. That's nothing. That's easy. That's like, you know, I mean, sure. We've all been there. Like I've looked at my bank account before and had no money in it and been like, what, you know, it sucks. But let's talk about real things. You want to talk about like, you know, losing a loved one. There's so many worse things that cause way harder pain that type of stuff is just something you got to push through.
Do you think that pushes you to be more open towards taking risks and whatnot? Like what does taking a risk look like?
Taking a risk looks like what we're sitting in right now. Yeah. Like, you guys can come in here and look at it and it's like, wow, this is great. And this is awesome. And this is whatever. And from the outsiders looking in, yeah, it is. But at the same time, I signed a 5-year lease, you know, an 8-year loan. Like those are the type of risks. But, you know, I think you do those things. It's all based on your gut. And it's like, all right, cool. You know, you got to do it. You know, it's even how I got to LA. I didn't get to LA because of one thing. I moved from Atlanta to Los Angeles there was a culmination of things. It was a perfect storm, if you will. And that's the same way that leads me here. So even though, yes, on paper, it's a risk, at the same time, you got to look at where all the signs are pointing. Yeah. And if they're all pointing in one, you got to take that. And if you don't take that risk, then, you know, people want to look at the signs or lack thereof signs as they're taking risks. And then once they do that, they just kind of forget about the whole thing. But, you know, it's important for me to like, after you took that risk, continue to look at it and see if you are heading in the right direction. Because then if you took the risk, everything was pointing in the right, like what you thought was the right direction, you went down that direction. And then if it's been a year, if it's been 2 years and that direction doesn't seem to be panning out, well, then you need to back out and you need to go another way. The amount of jobs that we did in this studio last year alone was like a big sign that this was the right decision. Yeah. You know, we did our first job with this robot that, you know, I was so, you know, scared of purchasing or whatever.
Dan loves to talk about his robot.
Not true, but yes, because there's such a big financial.
Yeah, no, I understand.
There's a big emotional attachment to it too. But like we were able to book a big job with that really paid off. It's something that it's not even about the robot. It's like I was able to create something that I'm really proud of that has attracted other talent to the studio, believe it or not. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like everything is kind of like building blocks. Every moment in life is pregnant with the next moment in life. Yeah. For me, it's like, yeah, did you make the right decision? And then you gotta gut check that decision as you go along. All right, was this the right thing to do? Okay, cool.
There's no denying there's a sense of like confidence whenever you speak, like a swagger. Mm-hmm. So does it mean that unless you have that built in, there's never going to be any sort of success in someone's like...
No, because I'm like, and it's not like something I'm intentionally doing. I'm not like consciously trying to exude confidence right now. But for every moment, there's definitely moments where I'm not confident. There's definitely moments where I'm insecure about, you know, my decisions or whatever. And it just kind of ebbs and flows.
How important is it to feel that though?
It's important to feel both of them because like, honestly, on one side, you got to let your ego has a negative connotation, but sometimes you got to let your ego shine through because if you've been putting in the work and you've been doing doing hard work, no one's gonna sell yourself for you. So you kind of gotta like let that show. But it's also important to be humble too, because all this stuff can be taken away from you, you know, at the same time. You know, it doesn't have to be, it could always be worse. Recognizing that, but it's a balance, man. It's a balance just like anything else. And that's such a cliche thing to say. There's definitely a balance. And knowing just kind of when to be confident, when to be humble is kind of the biggest challenge. But you know, you just gotta be yourself, you know. But I've definitely gone through a phase where I was not, when I left music videos and I first moved out here and I first started doing the studio work, I definitely was like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like I just worked so hard to build up this one career, this one thing.
Yeah.
What's going on?
If the balance between business and creativity is the primary concern of a creative, then the relationship between ego and self-doubt are a very close second. One thing that Dan seemingly doesn't lack is a sense of confidence. It could be earned through past accolades or simply being around a culture of hip-hop that has rarely allowed participants to show weakness. Regardless, what Dan says is something that's often lost on those who don't feel comfortable selling themselves. Nobody's gonna do it for you, nor should you expect someone to take on this responsibility. Was it hard to make that transition out of a place where you built up a name for the sake of starting basically a new career?
Yeah, it was hard. It was very hard. It was very scary. I was like, I mean, it was always something that I knew I could go back to, but I'm not a big fan of going backwards. I'm not afraid to go backwards if I have to. It's also not something I want to do.
Yeah.
You know, no one wants to consciously make the wrong decision. But I moved out here and like for a long time, I was like, I wasn't really proud of what I had done. You know, I was like, man, like being back home from you know, in Atlanta, like, you know, it's like, oh, Dan, like just up and left, like, you know, like, or, you know, there's always like you know, you can hear the voices of like, oh, like he fell off, like he's not doing music videos anymore. People associate it with failure, even though on the flip side, I'm building up to do something bigger and better than I've ever done before. And I guess only recently in the last, you know, couple years, months, whatever, have I really started to kind of see that pay off. And so that's probably why, you know, I'm more confident now than I was back then. Yeah. But, you know, you got to put your head down and you got to work. You got to grind. There's seasons. There's always not a season for being on top.
Is there anything that is outside of your professional life that contributes to your professional life?
Like you asked that question, and like I'm not big on like artistic inspirations and things like that. Like I don't have like an artist, let's say a photographer or a director who I'm aspiring to be like. All that stuff is kind of like self-motivated or it's all internal. And there's definitely people who I respect the hell out of, and there's people who I admire, and there's people who I look to for maybe like style and things like that. But like sometimes like people ask me those questions and I'm like, those names don't even roll off my tongue that fast because I'm just like, I gotta think about it, you know? Yeah. Sounds kind of cliche too, but like exercising and just overall health has been a big thing in the last year for me. Wake up early, working out, eating right. Your body it really is, you only get one, you know what I mean? And it's your temple. And as you take care of it, it will take care of you. And as I growing up an athlete and just, you know, training really hard and then not doing that for a long time, and then getting back into it, it just reminds you, like, you know, if you can push yourself, because it's all the same, you know, like whether you're pushing yourself in the gym or whether you're pushing yourself at work, like the work ethic is still, you know, it's the extra, you know, if you're exercising hard work, it doesn't matter what arena you're in. Yeah. But there's definitely been times where, you know, because I think in general, it's important to fail. It's important to try and fail, I guess is what I'm saying. And like, it doesn't matter where you're getting that from, whether that's your industry, whether it's something else, because you have to trick your brain. Because you know, it's like you get to this point where you're like, there's no way I can do this. I can't, like, you know, my trainer will be like, well, I need, like, you just did this, but we're going to do this exercise. And I'm like, I look at him like, that's impossible. There's no way that's happening. Yeah. And then I'll sit there and do it and I'll push myself, and he might have to help me, but I get through it, you know? And I think that type of stuff, it bleeds over into other arenas. Yeah.
Do you think that the world of athletics and the creative world are actually more closely tied than people give them credit for?
Absolutely. That's why I love sports. And I'm not the biggest sports fan in the world, but I know the value that playing sports for me played in my life, you know what I mean? And sports is great in a lot of different ways. Even if you didn't play sports, like it can unite you, it can unite people. It's an amazing thing. I remember, you know, when the Falcons lost the Super Bowl, I was extremely upset. and just like sad. I'm just like, why am I feeling? I had to ask myself, like, why do I feel this way? I don't care. Like, like at the end of the day, I'm not getting paid off of it.
Yeah.
You know, like I didn't bet on it, but I wanted my team to win. You know, and like so there's the emotional connection that I haven't really looked into that much. But sports it just plays a very deep role into a lot of things, and athletics and taking care of your body. And I'm a hardworking person, but I'm also a pretty lazy person. So it's definitely tough to get into that routine and get into that regiment. But once you do, it has a lot of long-term benefits.
Do you see yourself doing what you're doing for a long time? Like, have you finally found a chapter of your life that has no end in sight?
You know, I didn't know that I was going to be here doing what I'm doing now, but I think I found a kind of a niche in some form of capacity. What I'm going to do is going to probably change over time, but it's kind of always going to be around creating. I'm a maker of things. And right now it's mostly content, you know, but that could change. But there's production. It's production. And people say production, and, you know, especially in Hollywood, like production has a connotation. Production to me just means producing, making something from nothing. And that's why when people say I'm a producer, I'm like, well, you know, obviously, what kind of producer are you? You know, because are we talking like even in the creative world, the film world, whatever, that has so many different types of meanings, let alone like other industries such as music or digital producer or, you know, there's so many different ways to produce. So, you know, but I think what I'm good at is understanding what needs to be done and figuring out a way to get that done in the best way possible. And that's why too, like a lot of like the street smarts and stuff that you talk about is like, it's like working with people, you know, I'm working with people. I'm a people person to a degree. And that's why it's like, I can hire someone and we're going to get the job done no matter what. But that might be a one-off experience, or I might hire you and we're going to work together for forever. Mike, first time we worked together, he drove from LA to San Francisco to do photo shoot with Nike. And since then we've worked together almost every day, you know, since then.
Shout out to Mike.
Yeah. Visual assassin. And those are the type of relationships and those are the type of things that I seek out. And like, I don't need them, and those don't come very often. They don't come, but it doesn't matter. Like if you meet someone like that, you just keep building on that. We're a small, nimble team here. Our studio gets more done with a smaller team than some studios get done with a staff of 50. And we pride ourselves on that. That's something that I can hang my hat on. Fast, we're nimble, but it's not because we're doing anything special other than just working with the bright people who get it. Back in the day, or, you know, everyone, there's like one thing. There's like everyone wears one hat. And now it's like, no, like I don't wear one hat, you know, so why should anybody that works for me wear one hat?
Do you think that is where creatives are going? The need for people to have?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, now it's like creative directors can't just be creative directors. I mean, creative directors just used to be deck organizers, you know, put together a deck. Now you got to know how to use Cinema 4D. Now you got to know how to use Photoshop. Now you got to, now you got to know how to take a decent picture just so you can do a comp or mock something up. 5-10 years ago, were not the case. It's about enabling yourself, giving yourself the power, you know, so you're not always depending on someone else. Taught myself how to do a lot of things. I know what I don't need to teach myself. The era that we're moving towards right now, I mean, also with technology and software becoming so much more accessible, we're talking about DaVinci Resolve, a coloring software, used to be $5,000-$10,000 to buy a license. Now they give it away for free. So it's really in your hands. It's up to you to teach yourself, you know, the craft. If it's something you're passionate about, and if it's something you're passionate about, it won't even feel like work. You don't have to be the best at everything, but you need to know how to get your message across.
Looking at what you've achieved so far and where you want to go, like how much of this is defined by luck? How much of it is defined by hard work and talent?
I don't like to use the word luck. I like to use the word fortunate. But there's definitely been some great opportunities that have kind of just come my way.
Was there ever a moment in time that, there's an opportunity that you wish you had handled differently, or that you had the opportunity to engage in and it just never happened?
No.
Do you have regrets?
I have some regrets. Yeah. I have some regrets.
Like what?
During the music video phase of my kind of career, I was very selective with the jobs that I picked. There was rightfully reason so, but looking back on it, I should have done everything that I could. I should have busted my ass. I should have not slept, you know, which there was plenty of those instances, but I could have just done more. There was, especially there was artists who wanted to work with me that maybe they didn't have the budget, or maybe or maybe like it was just gonna make me a little uncomfortable because like I had another project that I was doing and we couldn't work it out. There was a lot of videos left on the table, or I was a very like, let's say I'm a pretty emotional person in general. And so like, let's say I was supposed to do like this happened all the time with Future. Like me and him he would tell me he wants me to do a video. And I would I would get all ramped up for it. I would write the treatment. We would start pre-production on it. And then the label that he was signed to the major would then say, no, we're going to work with this director instead. And then I would get all like butthurt and sad about it. And I would think it was Future's fault. And maybe some of it was, but I shouldn't have. And then I would just like, maybe we would lose contact for a little bit and we wouldn't talk. And then there were so many projects that I should have just said, like, he's got so many hit songs. I could have just said, all right, cool. Like, what's the next one? Let's do the next one. I shouldn't have been so emotionally worked up about it because, like I said, there was a lot of good content left on the table.
But like, why do those regrets even matter, knowing that that's no longer what you do? Like,
well, that's why I answered that question kind of like that in that way of like, at the end of the day, I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be, and I feel like I'm moving in the direction that I'm supposed to be moving towards. So, but I just know that it's about experience, and I didn't grow up on a set, even though I did grow up around my dad being a camera operator, editor, or whatever. I did have some experience, but I didn't come up the ranks the normal way of like, you're a PA and then you're, maybe you work your way as a grip, then you're a gaffer, then you're a camera assistant, then maybe you become a DP, then you can direct something. And like, those are people some DPs, they have 10 years of experience before they've ever even turned on a camera. I didn't have that. I literally I'm born of like the DSLR boom. So it's like, because I had access to a camera and because I was already kind of creative and I wasn't afraid, I just got the technology and jumped out there and sink or swim moment. So, and there's something to be said about that too. In terms of my regrets, I wish I would have done more because number one, I would just have, the more work you do, the more chances you are for I don't like, if I look back on my music video stuff now, there's only a handful of projects that I'm like really happy about and excited. And like, this will stand the test of time.
Which one are those?
Don't make me name drop my own stuff.
What?
No, I'm kidding.
We all want to know.
I really liked some of the work I did with Big Crit for a song called What You Mean. Yeah. A lot of the work I did with 2 Chainz. We only did like 3 videos, but all of those. Turn Up, there's a song I had called Turn Up, video for a song called Riot that I was really proud of. And there was some documentary stuff here and there that was like small stuff, but it's just like, but when you look at it, it's like a format that I could go back and I could replicate now, and I could do that for Nike, and it's a commercial. At the time, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, which I think is beautiful. Because there's power in not knowing. There's power in being a rookie. There's power in, because you're going into it and you're not going into it with all of the crazy things that'll psych you out. You're just like, all right, this is what we got to do. Let's do it. You just start putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And before you know it, you've got something, you're like, oh, this is cool. And it's just so pure and it's just so innocent. You're like, how did you do that? You're like, I just did it. And now I feel like I'm back to that point, because now I feel like, all right, cool. You have to learn everything in order to know what rules you want to break, in order to know what matters, in order to know what doesn't matter. Having control over this, like, and consciously saying, I want to consciously leave this out, or I want to consciously add something here that's going to add to the mood, that's going to add to the feeling of something. That's something that takes time.
What's the last thing that you've done that you were scared of?
That I was scared of?
Yeah. Don't tell me you don't get scared.
I get scared all the time. I used to get scared before every music video because there was a lot of uncertainty in them. Now I don't get as scared as much because we're big on prep, and I have the capacity in the space to do that. So I know what we're doing before we do it. We did a shoot for Beats for Product Red that was featuring Yvonne Orji. We tested out the lighting and everything beforehand. The shoot was done before she even got here. All she had to do was walk in and sit down. Obviously there was a rapport, and you have to like get the right shot and things like that. So doing it this way makes things a lot more thought out, a lot more secure. But the last thing I did that I was scared of, I don't know, it was probably taking the risk and moving into a bigger studio space. It probably wasn't anything like a project related.
Like, do you think that really just comes down to being in a mind state where like nothing phases you? Because that's kind of what I feel, as though there's nothing that's inherently gonna be so big, so bad that you can't get
that's
past
kind
it.
of, but that's more so come with me. That's more so come with age. than it has necessarily with anything else. Like
It's not
now,
personality.
It's not personality. It's just it's like now it's like something bad happens. You know, I used to be the person who would be depressed, or I'm gonna blow a gasket and be mad and yelling at people, like just going crazy.
Yeah.
To now it's like, it's not that big a deal. You know, my friends or the people who I work with are more like, you're not mad about this? More than I'm just like, I'll be patient, you know, I'll be patient. Let's figure it out. At the end of the day, everything's going to work itself out the way I'm a believer in the universe. And so like everything's going to work its way out the way it's supposed to, you know. It's not that anything phases me.
Yeah.
It's more so that I know that this is not in my control.
Yeah.
And so whatever I do right now is not going to change anything.
Yeah. Before you embarked on this career as a creative, what did you think it'd be like? And what has been the reality?
I don't know the specifics of what I thought it was going to be like. I don't remember like what I thought it was going to be like to what's been the reality. I can tell you that it's not what I thought it was going to be. I can tell you it's, you know, and that's, you know, you have this idea, you paint this, I'm a very like visionary type of a person. It's like you paint this idea of what you think it's going to be like in your head. And then you get to that point and you're like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Not to say that it's better or worse. It's just different. And every instance is, and every situation is different. But I think that's kind of what keeps me going is I'm always chasing that romantic idea of whatever I'm chasing, you know? And I think as long as you do that and you keep your wheel spinning and you keep growing and you keep progressing, one day you're going to look up and you're going to look back and you're going to say, wow, like look how far I've come. Like that's what makes it interesting. Keeps me going. It's just like, all right, cool. Like I'm still not there. Like we got to keep going. You got to keep going. So, and the reality is you'll never get there.